Okay. And I already tweeted it out. I had it set up, ready to go. I was ahead of myself. Good for me.
Perfect.
Okay.
Someone has some animals in their background.
Yeah. Somebody's
I think that's me.
dang.
I have so many neighbors, and
No
they all
problem.
have just. We're gonna have to deal with it, you know. I live in Santiago, Chile. We have a lot of dogs everywhere, so.
No problem. Okay. Hi everyone. Welcome to Feminist AF live show for Her Body and Other Parties. I almost wanted to say the other book by Carmen Machado.
I've got to.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the Greenhouse is one of my favorite books. So.
I'm reading this for a different book club on Monday. So reading these so close together, it's a trip.
I bet. I'm Rachel. This is obviously my book club, and these are my guest hosts. So if you guys want to go around in a circle and introduce yourselves, Angela, you can start.
All right, I'm Angela. My booktube channel is Literature Science Alliance. This was my reread of this book, and I still loved it. And if you just want someone who talks about fantasy, sci-fi, and any book clubs make me read, come check out my channel, or don't. It's all good.
Hello, my name is Elise. My channel is The Petite Punk. I have read In the Dream House, but this was the first time I've read Her Body and Other Parties, and I really enjoyed it.
Day, you can go. Oh, Knox, you can go. Either way, sorry.
It's a battle. I guess to start. Hi, I'm Deya. My channel is Pseudo Literature, even though I have no content because I deleted it. But I have a book blog with the same name, Pseudo Literature, also on Twitter at Pseudo Antarctica. And this is my first time reading this book, but I also read In the Dream House before, and I have a lot of feelings, many, many feelings. Knox.
Oh, Knox, you're muted.
There's no audio.
Technical
you don't have audio.
Wait.
This is very thematic to some of the stories.
Metaphors everywhere.
Oh, I heard something.
Not yet.
I heard someone's Discord, but I don't know.
Oh, it was Discord.
Oh,
hi.
That was my Discord, actually. Okay. God, this always happens. Rachel keeps having me. Rachel keeps bringing me back. It's a miracle at this point. Hi, everyone. I'm Knox. I've never read anything by this author before, so I guess I'm the only one who's In the Dream House is on my TBR for this month. And I have a YouTube channel, Knox Reads, and a blog, Knox Reads. Do I post on them consistently? God, no. But you know what? We're trying. Okay. And yeah, I also have feelings.
Okay, so I don't think we need to do star ratings just because this was like individual stories. I very much felt like each one got its own star rating, and they were so varied that I don't think we need to do star ratings. But if you want to kind of shout out which was your favorite story and go in a circle again, mine I think was, oh crap, and I forget the names of them. The one with the pandemic in it.
Inventory.
That one was my favorite.
I'm looking at the table of contents.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi, everyone in the chat.
Okay. So I think my actual favorite to read is the first one, The Husband Stitch. But the one that I low-key just I know everyone hates and I just love that it exists is Especially Heinous.
I hated it.
I know everyone hates it. I know, but I think it does what it wants to do perfectly. I just think in terms of art.
I'm gonna defend that one when I get to. I think I can defend that one. Yeah.
But yeah. So, and I do give it a star rating of 4.5 stars as a collection because that's what I do.
Nice.
That's good. Okay. I only had access to the audiobook, so it's low-key kind of difficult to distinguish when there was a new story. So I'm gonna Google and cheat right now and look which was which. But I think it was called 8 Bites, 8
Yes.
Bite 8.
Yes.
I really loved that one, and whatever the last one was called. Those were my two favorite.
Something at parties, difficult at parties.
Yeah.
Difficult at parties.
Yeah, loved those two.
I actually really liked Real Women Have Bodies. The one that
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know. It did something. It really like touched me. I really liked it. But also 8 Bites. 8 Bites. I was a crying mess when I finished that one.
Same.
This is it touches a certain things, very particular things that are very like close to home. But I really like that one, and I would give it also like I would give it a 5 stars. Like I think the story is 5 stars. I think the story is like in general work really well as a collection, and some of them are like a little bit maybe slower or weaker. I don't know. I don't think anything she writes is weak, but but I would give it like a big rating.
Yeah, her writing is immaculate.
Yes.
I feel like I'm cheating for school right now, looking up the summaries. Just as a
But
little
I've heard-
refresher.
I heard that about the audiobook too, though, that she never like says the
It's
title.
really
of the story.
difficult to like
She says it
distinguish
one
when there's a new
time.
story.
She
Yeah.
says it once, yeah, and it's like, oh, is that the name? Wait, she's still going. Go back.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where like you don't know if it's a part of the writing, like a sentence or the name of a new chapter. Like,
Mhm.
so.
And I
Don't mind
agree,
me cheating.
Daya, that like this is something that's such a good like sum of its parts. Like it's so thematically consistent, but different angles.
Yeah.
Can you hear the dogs again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, I'm gonna close the window. Give me a second.
All right, Max, which one was your favorite?
I'm torn between Husband Stitch and 8 Bites.
Yeah.
Especially heinous the SVU one.
Yes, it's the one everyone hates. It's the one
Yeah,
everyone
I hated it.
I'm back.
Yeah.
Couldn't stand
I know
it.
that. I
Sorry.
know that. I annotated so much of it.
Really?
It felt so long and like I listened. I switched, so I listened to the audiobook and I also did ebook. So I listened to the audiobook on my drive home from school, and yeah, I was like, this story sounds completely different than the last story we read, and it took about 3 stories for me to realize that they were each a different story because I'm slow. And then the audiobook just like one word, and I'm like,
The book made that chapter so confusing because I ended up downloading the ebook because I was so confused. But like you know how there's different little subsections in that
Yeah.
section. I don't know. It was so confusing in the ebook
I
format.
can't imagine
realized-
doing an audiobook of Especially Heinous. I can't even.
Don't.
the narrator's really good.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's just the
But
formatting.
It's just reading.
1 second.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Did you see?
I think that needs to go away.
Yeah. Bye bye. That was weird.
Oh Lord. Okay. Anyway.
Let's continue.
It's too early in the morning for this.
It's 11:30. Can the men chill?
It's
So
her body.
So what themes stuck out to you reading this? Obviously, one overarching theme, which I think is something that Carmen Maria Machado writes about just sort of effortlessly, is bodily autonomy, right? So it starts off with the husband stitch, and also it's sort of a theme in the Dream House, and also I really liked the part in which story? Not me forgetting all the names. Which story was it that the girl went to like a camp?
The Resident.
The Resident.
The Resident.
Oh, that was a weird one. I forgot about that.
Yeah,
It was weird. It was weird. It sort of reminded me of when I was giving birth to my youngest, and they put me on I can't remember the name of the drug, and I felt like I was having an out-of-body experience. I was like, oh, this reminds me of that. This story reminds me of that. So the part in that story where she says, she's talking to the other person who keeps calling her crazy. And she's like, I am allowed to be whatever I want in my own body. Like, I'm allowed to exist on my own terms.
Yeah.
So I think that bodily autonomy was a major theme throughout the entirety of the book. But what else stuck out to you guys?
Well, I definitely starred that line. It is my right to reside in my own mind. It is my right. Like, I really liked that.
I love that.
Yeah.
I really like that whole like monologue she did. Like just going off. I also kind of highlighted the line that I like the most. Wait. Give me a second. Where is it?
I love the highlighting and the underlining.
Yeah.
I love that.
Notes. Professionals. The you aggressively ordinary woman.
Damn.
Okay. Yes. Go
That was so
off, you.
good.
I really liked it because they undermined her like the whole
Made me so
trip. I
mad.
really liked it.
A theme I really liked, and I don't know if it was so much like a loud theme, but it was definitely always there, is the separation of sex from morality. Sex was just sex a lot of the time. Sometimes it could be romantic, sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes there was a character dealing with trauma related to sex, but sex was never morally tied to something negative or good. It just was a human experience, which I think is important when you're discussing a whole work about a woman's relationship to their body, which is like, you know, we're having all these angles of women's relationships to their bodies or other things to their bodies, etc. So
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that's what I especially loved about Inventory.
She just has a list like of people she's had sex with, and it's not like a bad thing. It's not it's not slut shamey, and it's great.
Yeah,
it's great not being slut shamey.
Yeah.
One thing I wouldn't say this was really a theme, more of like a exploration of a topic. But any kind of scene that involved cognitive dissonance, that kind of just made my skin crawl. I wouldn't say I enjoyed it, but I really love like explorations of uncomfortable feelings like that and questioning what your own what you believe versus what you're doing. And I think there was a lot of that in this book that, again, just like made my skin crawl. But I appreciate authors that can really capture that feeling of going against what you know in your head is something you want.
Knox, did you answer? Sorry.
Did I? I don't know. I just jumped on. Like, yeah, no, we love not being slut shamers. Like, did I answer?
Actually, Elise brings up a good point. So this whole book was sort of, I mean, if you go through the Goodreads reviews, one thing that people talk about is it being uncomfortable and unsettling. So what was a topic for you that felt that way in this book?
Oh my God, all of it.
Every story had something gay.
Raise my hand.
Oh, go for it now.
8 Bites felt like it called me out. In a way, it felt like it was calling me out with the spoiler alert for the ending of 8 Bites. But when she's like, this was my loving self, and I was not kind to you. Because of how she just treated herself and the way she looked. I was like, oh, like I'm in the car driving and I'm like, oh, I'm about to cry. Like it was very much something that it made me uncomfortable. I don't think in like the spooky way, like there's something in the house, but it felt like she looked right through me. And so it was very, and then I also have somebody in my family who did the gastric bypass surgery. And so I remember just seeing her again after she had the surgery, who I had always seen my Nina as this beautiful woman. She was beautiful to me, you know? And she was just like, so much like, look how skinny I am now. Look how beautiful I am now, you know, wearing like cheetah high heels and things like that she had said she could never have worn before that. And I remember like being happy for her because she looked happier, but at the same time it was just weird to me because it was like, well, is this thing where people when they lose weight they offer to give you their fat clothes? I felt you go when you did that. And it could be people you know or people you don't know. I've had a woman at the farmer's market offer to give me her fat clothes. I've had my Nina this was about when I was 10. She was like in her 50s offering to give me her fat clothes. It's like just the feeling of being that person where you feel like, I lost the weight, so now it's your turn.
Yeah.
It's this terrible, like, gnawing thing. And it's hard to grow up and love yourself and treat your loving self kindly. And they tell you things like, oh, yeah, that was my shame.
Oh,
And you'll go away, or my inner beauty and things like that. They'll tell you all these great things, but they don't tell you to love yourself as you are. They're like, once you lose the weight, you will love yourself so much. And I'm like, 22, still waiting for that moment, to love myself. Because I don't know, that book called me out, and I almost cried while I was driving, and I should not cry while I usually cry while I'm driving, but that's because I hate driving, not because I'm getting called out by an audiobook. So
Driving anxiety is a real thing. I can attest to that.
I never got my license. Same reason. So
I
turning 21
refuse
next week.
to learn.
That is so valid. So that particular story I felt like was a really good depiction of not only just like fat phobia in general, right? And the lack of self-love because of fat phobia, but also the relationship you have with somebody you should, in theory, be close to, like your mother, and how fat phobia can affect such a relationship on such a deep level. And I really felt that on a personal level, how her daughter was like, I mean, I look the same as you did when you were my age.
Yeah.
Are you saying that I'm gonna end up being you one day? And like, why don't you love me as I am? Woof, that hurt me.
Do you love every
Yeah,
part of me?
that
That line.
I've had that conversation.
Ouch.
It's not fun.
it is not fun.
No.
So yeah, that did make me uncomfortable because it was almost too personal, and I felt like Machado was looking in on my personal life a little too much. So yeah, that would be my answer as well. Is 8 bites felt just too uncomfortable for me almost.
That was the exact instance I was going to bring up, the like part where the narrator's mom wasn't really connecting that they were shaming the exact same body that they had.
Yes.
Like,
ouch.
felt a little personal.
Yeah.
And there was there was just the part where she was second with the sisters and how it was a family thing. And even though the daughter was just, this new like feminist and tried to give her feminist view and that she should have loved her body, she was still the mom in this circle that fed the fat phobia and the toxicity, and that was passed down to her mother, and how generational that is. It's so, how did she know about my life? That's my question. That's so many things about the whole collection feel so like specific that it's just, it also speaks a lot of how universal these things are, that so many of these things really get to a uncomfortable point to every person. That story is going to be really uncomfortable because it's so personal and so specific. And I don't know, I am flabbergasted, impressed by her, by Carmen Maria Machado. It's just wow.
I guess I have to pick my story. It wasn't 8 bites, but I don't have the same relationship with my body as like that narrator did. I think for me, when I first read it, because like I said, this was a reread, my first, and I think you kind of talked about this when you were talking about your book club, like in your video, Rachel, is like how much lust and sex was in the first couple stories, like so like unapologetically on the page, which like I am like that, but like I'm not used to reading it, and I'm not used to like being allowed that space to just, unapologetically be like, oh yeah, it's okay to like want these things, because that was very much like my teenage experience. Was like I didn't really do drugs or go out to parties, but like I was way more sexually active than my mom would have wanted me to be, not because she was against it, but she didn't, want me to get pregnant or anything like that, normal concerns. And so that was kind of jarring on the first read. And then like especially heinous. Have you guys watched the video Too Many Cooks that was like on Adult Swim a couple years ago? Like that, it makes fun of the sitcom opening scene and then it just devolves into madness. That's how that you have. Oh, you should. That's the story makes a lot of sense when you know that Carmen Maria Machado was sick with the flu watching SVU for days, and then she wrote that story. So it felt like a dream. There's a little of that, but also just like the parody of making fun of something, and then it just spirals into madness. And like 1 minute you're like, oh, this is just a silly thing, and the next you just have a deadpan like, oh yeah, that's how the real world works. Like the dissonance of that back and forth of like weird ghosts and doppelgangers, and then just like, oh yeah, of course, like this rapist is going free. Like, like the dissonance of that back and forth. So yeah.
You're kind of making me like it more.
Oh, I can make you like it. Don't you worry.
Please do.
It's good. I've never seen any episode of SVU. That's not the one we're talking about. Yeah. Never seen any episode of that. I don't even know what it is about in general, but I love the idea of a magical New York, of a magical realism New York. So I did enjoy it.
Well, for your context, to make you even understand the story moment, the two main characters are actually the two main characters in Law and Order SVU, and it's the Special Victims Unit. And every episode of that TV show discusses someone who is sexually abused or raped or there is pedophilia. Like it's always the worst crimes that they have to solve. Every episode. And there's like 20 seasons. It just keeps going. Yeah. Which is why I think the story keeps going.
Yeah. When I was listening to the audiobook, I remember looking and I was like, wait, this is a 2-hour long chapter? How?
It's only 70 pages.
I think my problem was I've watched SVU so much since I was a kid, because that show is older than I am.
It just keeps going.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, wait, Stabler left in like season 5. Why is he still? And so I was like, literally for like, I think an entire season, I was just going, Stabler should be gone by now. He left the show.
That's funny.
Christopher Maloney is not in SVU anymore.
Wait, was season 5 when we got the first doppelgangers? I wonder if she did that.
I was like, did the narrator just say the names wrong, or is that how it's printed on the page? So reading it via audiobook was very confusing.
It's not an audiobook friendly book, despite how like I could listen to that audiobook narrator's voice for days.
Oh yeah.
But it is not an audiobook friendly book. So if you listen to audiobooks and then I listen to them at 2 times speed, you might want to cry a little bit.
Yeah, I listened to them at 3 times speed.
Because like I said, that's the only one I don't normally annotate, and that's the one I was like, I knew when I reread it, it's like, okay, I now know that things are callbacks, and I need to keep track of things because they're going to come up in like 5 pages later, so I can look back. And but that's another thing where I knew after I finished it the first read, I'm like, oh, I need to get a physical copy because I'm going to like that story so much more when I have the time to just like, because I think I read it slower than I normally would because I was just really trying to piece it out. Apparently, a lot of people agree with me.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in the chat saying Too Many Cooks is a national treasure, by the way.
It's really fun.
Machado in this book I found made her characters passive. I wonder if you found this to be true, and if so, if the talk of sex and relationship is heightened or diminished. I think that I don't really find her characters to be passive.
I think what he's trying to say is like normally the situations they're in are out of their hands, like an inventory. What can she do about the pandemic?
Yeah.
And real women have bodies, like that disease is just happening. Like I think there's just a lot of the larger scenarios for like some of the characters
happening to her.
Yeah, I think that a lot of it was focused on how some women might do in certain situations, and it wasn't really about like what they are going to do to affect, the situation, but rather how they get by. So I think that it was just sort of focused on that particular perspective. In some of the stories, like with the pandemic, and then in others, like what is the resident?
Resident.
That's
The resident.
yeah, that's all happening to her. So I don't know. It's an interesting question. The talk of sex and relationships. I think that Carmen really hones in on relationships as a way to express how people move throughout situations. So I think that her use of talking about sex so explicitly is great for that reason, because not only does it normalize it, but it also gives us a way of like humanizing these situations where it's like there's a pandemic raging and we're hearing about, how this woman meets and has, sexual escapades with certain people. So I love that. That was my favorite.
Well, especially in like the last story, Difficult at Parties, we have this woman who's obviously suffered some trauma. We never know exactly the trauma. We can infer based off, the bruising and when she came home, but we don't know for sure. And how her and her partner are discussing how to get her back into like a lustful mindset, and they try porn and stuff like that. Like, I feel like in that case, that character themselves is actually not being super passive. I mean, she's doing better than I do when I'm in states of trauma or depression. She was actually trying things.
Yeah.
But I think and like that one and the resident, the way that Machado chose to like hyper fixate on details, the way that people do when they're like very insular, like I felt a little called out in those things. Like, yes, you're noticing all these things. Stop. Stop doing that.
Did you write my ADHD into your story?
Mm-hmm.
Like, did you write how my brain works into your story?
Like in the resident when she's talking about like the foot on the refrigerator and the dust around it, I'm like, yes, I did that as a kid. Calm down.
Let's see. Here's another question. Do the characters have a choice as all interactions happen outside of their control? Wonder if you have thoughts on this and what Machado is trying to explore.
I think so. I think her character, like, okay, so with Inventory, she chooses, she's like, okay, there's a pandemic. What I can do is try to run as far as I can to get away from this. And so she ends up on an island by herself, the ghost one, what's it called? Real Women Have Bodies?
Yeah.
She could have easily chose like to either say peace out once her partner was starting to fade, or she could, like, there's so many options that they had. She chose to stand because you know that somebody in that world left their partner the minute they started fading.
I mean, it felt like almost a cancer situation, right? Like it's a terminal. I mean, it's not. No one dies from it. That story is really weird to me. I can never. I think that's the story where I'm not connected enough to understand what she's saying. Like she's saying so much, and I'm just like, I don't know what's happening. But yeah.
But somebody left, because unfortunately that's just how humanity is sometimes, and it's like she chose like not to bring Marvel into this, but I'm with you till the end of the line, like I will love you until you are not here to love, and then I will love you after that, kind of.
Yeah.
And she's like, and someday it's going to come for me too. Like, I think she had already started fading by the ending, and she just didn't tell her partner, who probably would have been comforted to know, hey, it's not just going to be me, but that was just me. Well, it's how they choose to react to these scenarios you have no control over. My grandma always used to say to me, like, you don't have control over certain things, but you have control over how you react to them. So like when she had cancer and she told me, she goes, you're not going to freak out and you're not going to cry. And I'm like, huh? And then she told me, and I'm like freaking out and crying. She goes, I just told you not to do that. You can choose not to do that. I'm fine. And I'm like, like, you can choose how to react more or less. But then again, all emotions are valid. I want to clarify that.
Yeah.
Well, and even in that story, the women after they fade, we hear about some women choose to hide themselves in dresses or other inanimate objects. Some women are like invading ATM machines and like doing this whole like cyber warfare. Like we even have in that story, like, we know that these women who are still alive but aren't existing on like a physical plane anymore are choosing different ways to deal.
They're protesting too.
Yeah.
It's great.
I thought that part of the electronic things was kind of like an excuse of men. I thought it was something that kind of they thought the women were doing, so they chose to kind of blame them for doing them. Kind of those things of they needed an excuse to hate on women that they couldn't control, they couldn't see, they couldn't touch. Kind of.
Oh.
I mean, that for sure happened. We saw that news scene. But I also like to think that, you know, there would be some women who, if they had that power to interact in the cyberspace. I like both.
Fuck it up.
But they were for sure blaming women. Like, how dare they not exist on this physical plane anymore? How do we trust them?
How dare they not let me touch them? Who do they think they are? Oh, that also happened in the first one, right?
Yes.
The husband was like, "Why can I touch the green ribbon?" And
I'm your husband. Let me touch your ribbon.
the husband, let me touch it.
And,
Yeah.
like,
I need to know everything about you.
That was such a good story because it removed like the idea of like a man just needing more sex. It's like, no, he got all the sex he could have ever wanted. This woman was like a goddess of sex, but no, he couldn't. He had to have everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that what Machado did there was pretty genius. Like Angela just said, it was not just, it was about needing to entirely own every single ounce of this woman's humanity. And I think that the way that she wrote that was just brilliant. That was my second favorite story for sure. I think that there's a reason that the book starts off with that, because it's
really, also the cover, at least of my copy. It
is. I think that it really sets.
I didn't notice that.
It's really disturbing once you see it.
I didn't put it together.
It's like a whole neck. Yeah,
it's not a dress.
It was a corset at the beginning.
Yeah, you can't unsee it once you see it once.
It's
the whole neck with a ribbon. Yeah, I think that there is a reason that it starts off with that, because it really sets the tone for the central theme of this, which is bodily autonomy as a woman. So what other pieces of this anthology had talked about bodily autonomy that you noticed?
Well, we already mentioned in The Resident how, you know, you have autonomy in your own mind.
Yes.
So obviously it wasn't just, you know, your physical body, it was also your internal space.
Yes.
There's so many of them.
Yeah.
I think they all at some point touched upon that. The one about the mothers too. That one, I can remember a lot about that one, but I too.
Oh, that one was so weird.
That one was really weird.
Is that the one with the baby?
That's the one where we have a very unreliable narrator, and it's really hard to know what's happening.
I have no idea what happened.
At the beginning, I thought that the baby was kind of an allegory or representation, personification of the abuse in the relationship, and that it wasn't actually a baby.
I agree. On reread, I was like, this isn't a baby. This is a metaphor for grief or the abuse or something.
Yeah, something that they have to carry and to the rest of their lives. But yeah, and this goes again to the themes. This one, this story about the mothers and inventory, I think, the virus one, they both touch upon things that also happen in the dream house. That the relationship in the dream house kind of bleeds through this to this collection, and kind of recognizing those parts, it also made me feel a little bit like, ouch, icky for her and all of that, because this was her first collection, her kind of debut. And
yeah, no, I mean, especially now that I'm reading in the dream house, like, so before when I read 8 Bites, I was like, this is obvious about relationship to one's body and self-love and fat phobia and internalized fat phobia. And then I read in the dream house and she describes herself as fat in one of the dream house stories. Like, oh, I didn't know. I mean, I don't usually know what authors look like. I know she's queer and Latinx, but I didn't know how mid to plus or skinny she was. I had no sense of that. So that really informs that story. And it just feels very personal, this whole collection.
Yeah, I think now having read both of them, upon rereading, I would catch a lot more than I did the first time around. And it probably would feel more personal every single time. I have not watched this video or this movie, but
I remember the trailer.
Yeah, I remember the trailer.
There's so many like creepy horror movies with Mother, because isn't there one that has it's the actress, I can never remember her name, Octavia Spencer, is that her name?
Yes.
I feel like there's one with her in it too.
I think it's called Mama, and it's the one where she like.
Oh.
Okay, Rachel knows which one it is.
Right. Yes, Mama. Yes.
Is that the one about the ghost?
No, it's about
another mama.
It's about a lady who like has kids come to her place and like have parties there, and then it gets Ma. Yeah. And then it gets
So Mama was My Chemical Romance. My bad.
It gets real creepy real quick. Let's see.
I'm so glad you can't see the MCR decorations on my wall over there.
I love My Chemical Romance.
Oh, that album is also top tier.
Just gonna move that. There we go.
You're in good company here. Oh man, I feel like I got off topic. I feel like I was saying something and now I can't remember anymore.
Well, I had a question for you guys. So when I first read this was April or June. I don't know. It was somewhere in the early part of 2020's pandemic times.
Ooh.
And and I read inventory. And I read inventory, and I'm just sitting there like, okay, this happened. And then, you read the line where she is having the sexual experience with the doctor, or the CDC woman, who's like, we know it's not traveled by air. If people just stopped touching each other, we'd be fine. And how real it is that we know that if people are just told how to protect themselves, they won't do anything.
I love that moment because if people would just stay away from each other, and then they sort of look at each other like, well, not us though, right? Not us. Like, no.
But that's so real. Like, I've read a lot of contagion stories, like that like really assume that people would go into like a military state, or that there would be control. And like now living through one, we're just like, nah. People won't have self-control. There won't be government control. Like, it just will be.
Yeah, she really predicted how people would behave, didn't she?
I thought she wrote this. So reading this again, listen to most of the audiobook like either at work, and I work at my school. Don't recommend listening to this audiobook when you work at a school, like without headphones. And on the drive there, and I was thinking to myself, oh, so she wrote this in 2020. No, it's like freaking 2017 or something. I looked it up after. I'm like, but inventory felt so real.
Yeah,
because you're right. There was just if we don't touch each other, we'll be fine. Sex, like
tons of it. Another thing that I really appreciated about this book was how unapologetically queer it was, which she talks a lot in the Dream House about homophobia. Right off the bat, there's actually a really good section where she talks about queer villains. She's like, I often think about queer villains and the audacity of them, and I just love her for that. But here, it was different because it just was so unapologetically queer, and I really appreciated that. In almost every story, I think there was just this queerness of the characters, and it just was I loved the lack of homophobia here, essentially,
because it's rare, isn't it, in literature?
Yeah, especially with it being such a juxtaposition from her other book where she deals with that. I really appreciated that in this.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted from this collection, like I loved the bisexual and lesbian like representation, but especially because it was so much about one's relationship to one's body, and it was very female centric. I wanted a trans character.
Same.
Yeah.
Like, I really, really wanted that. And maybe they didn't feel like that because these are also personal and she's not trans. So maybe she didn't feel like she could have done that justice, maybe. But like, that was the thing where I'm like, this is very much a thing that I don't think intersects well with that space.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of hope that there will be a similar anthology that either exists that I don't know about or will exist in the future that does the same things that this did, but with that sort of that representation. I think that would be so important. Speaking of intersectionality, intersecting, what intersections do you feel like this book had? How do you think that this was an intersectional feminist read? It's a dumb question. Sorry.
Well, I think we've already mentioned the queer part, so we're talking about women with different sexual orientations. I mean, I think I actually don't know if we have like a just straight character. I guess in Difficult at Parties, we don't know if she's bi or not, but most of them are bi or lesbian. Like,
do we know in Husband Stitch?
She's bisexual because remember she goes to that art class and she really
okay.
Which was also a great scene because she didn't feel bad for thinking she was attracted. She just felt bad that she was invading on this person's career and like was sexualizing them.
I loved that relationship for that.
It was so good.
Like my bodily autonomy, also I feel bad because I kind of feel like I'm invading your bodily autonomy, but also, God, you're hot. Like,
yeah, no. So I think most of them were bi. I don't know if we have a straight one, but I was surprised, and maybe I shouldn't have been, that I didn't feel I noticed any. And this could just be my white diaspora Latina-ness, but I didn't feel that representation in any of the stories. I didn't notice it. I do think there were some Black characters, but I'm really bad at noticing that unless an author's like really explicit, and I don't think she was ever super explicit about that. Like, I think one character she might have described as having locks, but like, I don't know.
Are you okay, Ellie?
Yeah, I heard like delicate knocking on my door and I didn't know what it was, and then I hear my mom whispering. Sorry.
No, yeah.
It's your inner beauty dancing around your room.
I think that this could have done a little bit better of a job at being intersectional, if I'm being honest. I feel like there wasn't really a representation of a lot of things that could have been. I feel like there was a bit of a missed opportunity to talk about things like class and race and things like that. So I think it could have done a better job, but I appreciate it for what it is. It's the intersection of, not only being a woman, but being a queer person on top of that.
I 100% agree. I was actually surprised that, give me a second.
No problem.
Being hunted again.
I was actually surprised that race wasn't discussed more, especially because the author is, you said Latinx, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like a lot of books, especially that are kind of like in taboo topics, like really sexual, they often do feature white characters. So yeah, that was definitely something I wanted more out of.
Yeah, you make a good point, how it's often about how, like, the sexual liberation of white women that gets talked about more so than other races, and then especially that can also intersect with class. So like in the United States, for instance, if you are a poor person and you're having sex, that's a moral failing. They, so that's why they're like, no birth control for free, no government sponsored help for birth control and other sorts of like reproductive health issues, because having sex is seen as a moral failing if you're poor. So I think that this could have done
That's a really good point.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Oh, I said that was a really good point.
Oh, sorry.
Just agreeing.
I think that this book could have done a better job at that, since it's so sexually explicit. I hope explicit doesn't sound like derogatory, because that's not how I mean it, but so Elise makes a good point that typically it's sexual liberation of white women that is seen as like, wow, how great, how feminist. We need to do more than
that's because if you're
women.
a woman of color, it's seen as just there's so many negative things that come with being sexually active when you're a woman of color, at least in media, from what I've seen. And it's like there's this habit of, when you're having really books that are talking about something kind of, I want to say heavy topics like that, it's kind of seen as more palatable by people. Like if you have it with a white protagonists. Like slightly related is, remember the author of Cinderella is Dead got an email saying, "Yay, LGBT, yay, Black main character. Have you considered a white love interest though to make it more relatable?" Like just things like that, where it's like, okay, yeah, good for you, people of color, but how about white people? Like, what if we centered around them, so that way people will buy this and will like listen to the message, will listen if they're white, which I wish that she had done more, like, about being Latina. There's a very interesting way when you move through a world when you're Latina and or Latinx and fat, or Latinx and queer, or in their case Latinx, queer and fat, you know. And there's a very specific kind of way I feel like sometimes it depending on like just how you move through the world with it. And then, like, in my case, I'm mixed, which is why I have the brain that I do, is like about my identity.
I feel it.
Yeah, right. Right. It's like, especially, I think the author, it sounded like the author might be mixed. I can't tell.
I mean, it sounded like, so this is more a dig on me than the author, but I was raised in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm Venezuelan and white. So it sounded a lot like my experiences, which are detached from my culture. But like, I guess I would have, I don't know. I just would have liked more of that representation in it. But it does feel like this collection is meant to be so personal. So she really was pulling from her experiences, which maybe she doesn't, maybe her way of moving through the world is more centered around her queerness, her body being fat, and she's a woman, you know, like maybe for her, she's white passing enough that being a Latina doesn't affect her as much. Because I would say for myself, that for sure is the bottom of my list of ways that I interact with the world. Because I mean, no one guesses I'm Venezuelan when they see me or hear me talk. That's just not a thing. They don't even know Venezuela is a country half the time. Like, you know,
it's sad because I immediately just like,
Angela, of course they know Venezuela is a country. What other example are they going to give to talk about socialism?
You're right.
The communists.
They confuse it with Colombia because because of the flag.
Yeah, they do. And Ecuador also has a similar flag. Like all three of them are just like the same. But also we're always in every sci-fi movie because we have all the oil. So we're always going to be the center of the next like military thing. So you're right.
Oh my goodness.
But then again, they confuse it with Colombia because then that's where they stereotype drugs. You know, it's things like that. But I also, when you said that, I worked at a like Latinx cultural center at my school for 2 years. And we did a thing where we printed out a map of South America. We printed out a bunch of maps, and we just, because we were bored one day and we didn't. This was right before the pandemic hit, because it was one of those days where it's like, so we don't really have homework because our teachers are freaking out. So let's just all fill in a map of South America and see how many we get right. You're right. No. It was so many. Just like, I was like,
it's like Brazil. We know where Brazil is. Chile's the skinny one.
This is Chile.
Skinny queen.
Which one's Argentina? Is that Chile? They're so close together.
But once you get to Bolivia and Uruguay, people just can't.
There's a Paraguay and a Uruguay, but I don't know. Is there another Guay? Like, I know, and then I know that Colombia and Venezuela are they're next to each other. Which one's which? Which one?
Now I will say,
regardless from one of them. Like, it's just, you're right sometimes, and that's in the Latinx Cultural Center. I can only imagine.
Well, and
how
like,
they're
as
doing
like
in
a
Central
Venezuelan,
America.
I'm just so happy there's going to be a Colombian animated movie in Disney. I'm just like, fine. It's the closest I'm ever getting. Encanto. It's fine. There are arepas on the table. I'm accepting it.
I just saw a capybara on the top of the
Oh no, if Lo's watching, don't bring up the capybaras.
I did not. I brought up arepas because those are my favorite food. But that was the thing. Like, there was a lot of list of foods. I feel like the one thing you're always closest to in your culture when you're mixed is the other side's food. And there was always just lists of weird things in jars. But there was food mentioned. You know what I'm saying? She's just eating oysters on the Cape.
Yeah, it's food and it's music. When you're mixed, those are the ways you connect. It's food and music, which is
I know how to salsa my ass off. Like, I can do that fluently. Can I speak Spanish? No.
God, no. Same.
Knox, where have you been my whole life? I need more
I
mixed
know,
friends
like,
in
come
my
on. Like,
life.
I'm trying to assemble a group here of people who understand, because, like, my dad is mixed, but somehow he does not understand what I mean.
I think it's also different when you're a woman because there's more of that baggage of like you're supposed to carry that torch because you're like the source of memory and emotional baggage for the family.
Yeah, it's like you're supposed to go and have more kids, and it's like, yeah, there's a whole thing that you can do about like being either mixed or being like Latinx in general, being a woman, and how it's like you're supposed to further the generation.
The most I can offer for being mixed is I eat rice once in a while. But glad you all have these experiences. My dad came from the Philippines, but
Yeah, no,
I don't know.
when it's the
That's all I
father,
got.
it's always worse. They like statistically know that if it's the father's the one, they don't
Mhm.
bring the language or the culture nearly
Yeah,
as
I
much.
cannot
Thanks,
speak a word
Dad.
of Tagalog.
But yeah,
That's my.
I agree with
but
you.
that's another thing for the collection. Bringing it back, we only have one story with a fake baby.
Yeah,
We have the first story that has kids, but like motherhood is not a very strong theme in the collection.
no, and I'm glad because when she does talk about motherhood, I'm so uncomfortable.
Does it call you out a little bit or something?
Well, first of all, like when she talks about like the whole in the husband stitch, the whole bodily autonomy thing. So like her child tries to touch her ribbon and she's like, I cannot allow that at all. So she's like, I'm gonna have to scare him in order to get him to never do that again. And so she shakes, a can of pennies at him, and she's like, she's talking about how his face and how he looked like betrayed, and I just was so uncomfortable because I get that, especially I'm a mom of really young kids. So at this point in my life, one of my biggest struggles is my lack of bodily autonomy. The fact that for years since 2016, I have felt like my body is not mine. My body has been for carrying kids, and now my body is for taking care of kids. And my kid uses me as a seat. He uses me to wipe his nose. He uses me when he's frustrated. He takes it out on my skin. He bites. He pinches. So it's like, I almost wish that Machado would not talk about motherhood because it's too much for me.
Well, and like the part you mentioned, it's even sadder because initially he was allowed to touch the ribbon until he started to get that possessive nature of his father.
Yeah.
And that was just sad, the innocence leaving.
Yeah, so I almost like wanted to attribute that to breastfeeding because it was like, okay, I'll breastfeed you. But then after a while, it's like, if you touch my boobs one more time, I swear to God, I'm going to just like lose my mind. It's a weird spot to be in. And the fact that she portrayed it in such a way that was like not, I don't know, the way she made it more like an allegory, I was so uncomfortable because it was too real for me, and it's something I'm going through right now. So woof. Woof.
And then right after that's the pandemic story.
Right after
I mean, there's no light story. There's no light
No.
story.
It's a horror collection. Of course, they're not gonna be light.
The horror is how it calls you out.
Yeah,
real
the comfortable feeling. I think that's what it
so
makes it
uncomfortable.
most horror. I was
So-
thinking, wait, sorry, like bringing it back a little. I was thinking about the Latinidad thing, and I can see how she didn't go directly there or try to explore it a lot because maybe trying to avoid the sexy Latina trope
Mm.
because she talks a lot about sex. She talks a lot about body autonomy, and touching that specific theme and Latinidad, it could be easily like misinterpreted, and I can kind of see that part. Sorry, if I didn't say it now, I was going to lose my.
No, that's
thought.
that's a really good point. That is the trope in media is either like made, unfortunately, which no dissing maids.
You
my
can
granny
say
came
the
out
JLo movie. You can say the
That's
JLo movie.
Made in Manhattan, or like seductress, especially of white men.
Yeah.
Like,
or like even just Modern Family, when it was such, a big thing when it came out, but now you even already can tell how dated it is. It still has a lot of harmful tropes around adoption and like the representation of Gloria, which some things they still do right, but like in other ways it's still a little bit homophobic, a little bit it's a product of 2008. And we're in like 2021.
It's a time capsule. It's most definitely a time capsule. The one good thing I liked about Gloria was that when she had that moment where she's like, "Do you know how smart I am in Spanish?"
I loved that.
That's such a great moment for her. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm learning Spanish when I speak English, but trying to learn Spanish but also being an English major and knowing that English is just 3 languages stacked on top of each other, wearing a trench coat. That the rules, welcome to English, where the rules don't matter. Like, I can only imagine being in the opposite, where your native language is Spanish and then you're learning English, where it's just like a bar fight of a language.
Yeah, like Spanish has some like pretty good rules. Like Spanish is like, we aren't doubling up consonants unless it's a new sound. Why would we do that? Like
Spanish is like, we saw what English did and that looks stupid.
Spanish is its own beast, and even it's complicated even for me. I don't know the rules of Spanish. I grew up with it. I don't know about all the tenses.
The subjunctive will drive me off a cliff. I don't know what the subjunctive is.
I've been taking Spanish for 7 years. I still can't.
We barely have it in English.
Yeah, that's the thing. When you grew up in a language, you don't understand the things of that language by name. I studied English. My degree, it's EFL, that's English as a foreign language, and it's a thing that teachers always said to us, that you know more about the grammatics and how English works than an English speaker. That's teachers as that. Sorry, a Spanish teacher also knows more about Spanish grammar, even if it's not the first language. It's just languages, man.
What I was told was the native speakers, like heritage speakers was what they called them in my high school, they're better at listening and speaking, because I would always get frustrated. I can't roll my R's. I can't. I sound like a dying car. I cannot roll my R's to save my life. Like, if
I thought you were going to try and say carro for a second.
I can't, because I can't. And the thing is, if you don't roll your R's, it says carro, which is like
a different word.
And I can't roll my R's. I just can't do it. But so I would get frustrated. And my teacher's like, "You're not a heritage speaker." And I'm like, "Yeah, isn't it obvious?" She goes, "Well, yeah." I'm like, "Oh." And she goes, "Well, but here's the thing. Heritage speakers are better at listening and speaking. But the students who come into the classes to learn Spanish like this, they're better at reading and writing." She goes, "And you're really good at reading and you're pretty good at writing." She goes, "But the other half is, when you grow up with this, you don't learn grammar. Like, your parents aren't going to sit you down and be like, 'Okay, baby, today we're going to teach you about the preterite.' Like, no, you're just going to learn how to speak the words, and you're going to know that sounds right. I don't know how to explain why that sounds wrong. That part sounds wrong, but I know that it is wrong, because I know what I'm saying."
When you use estar versus tener and port and para and like all those
I still don't know
things.
when to use ser or estar. I just roll. It's 50-50 chance. It's okay.
And then like my people in Maracaibo, they tend to sometimes use the like Spain conjugations that no one else in South America uses. They use estáis, and I'm like, what are we? Why?
I had one teacher teach it. I took first and second year, and they're like, "You don't need to do it." But then the third year, I had all of a sudden Novosotos, because the teacher's from Spain.
Yep.
But and of course, the Spanish language was going to be the one she totally gave priority. Spaniards.
So Rachel, I have a question for you. Since I know I recommended this book for this book club, do you regret it? Are you happy with it? Was it every feminist thing I promised?
I have like very mixed feelings on it, because the things that I loved, I really loved. I loved The Husband Stitch. I feel like that was a great short story. I loved Inventory. I think I loved it more because we live in a pandemic now. So I found that very relatable, and I found that very true to how people act in a pandemic. I also love how queer it was and how sex positive it was. But there were some stories that I really did not like. And it wasn't just the SVU one, which I just found weird. I found some of them to be like sort of half formed and too weird. Like they were verging on making a point and then never did. Actually, you know what they reminded me of is Lauren Huff's short story collection, and I know that she's, you know, kind of an interesting topic.
Poor Carmen.
Okay, so no shade to Carmen at all. She actually knows how to write and make a point. I think that in some stories she just sort of chose not to, which is the entirety of Lauren Huff's book. She writes a bunch of short story collections, and she verges on making a point, and you're like, oh, okay.
This is the cult lady, right? The lady
Yes,
who's
that's
born
the
in
cult lady.
Okay.
And I felt like the one with the mothers, I don't know what the point of that was, and I was kind of hoping there would be one as a mom. And let's see, I felt like the one with the SVU kind of lacked a point. And
I disagree on both of those, but I also knew they'd be better on reread. But
oh no, I'd love to hear what you feel about like the central point of those.
Please get us to like those stories.
Well,
please get us to like this.
I still don't like Mothers as much, just because I think it actually is one of those ones that you get closer to if you're like in that situation of like grieving the loss of a relationship and a loss of a potential future. Because I think that's what it was about, is this person had this other person walk out of their life and they're framing it as, here's this baby, I've done what I can. But I think it was really this relationship's over, it's done. And then our character's descending into trauma, and like, I think she was grieving a potential future they would never have. And in the same time, we have the flashbacks to that harmful relationship, which I'm sure will be informed more once I finish in the dream house and stuff like that.
Yeah, you sure will. Holy moly.
Yeah.
I'm scared to pick it up now.
Woof.
Yeah. But, and then like the SVU one, I think the point of that is just that the world is especially heinous, and that the fact that we do just like not glorify it in media, but like we literally just, we use that content. And so it's kind of like, has anyone here read The City We Became? I know some have, but okay. So, you know, in The City We Became, you know, the city has a soul and it's made up of all of these boroughs. Well, in this case, there's a monster under New York City that eats what you feed it and becomes, you know, it craves what you feed it. And New York City is just only feeding it travesty and heinousness. And you just kind of like see that throughout the whole thing and how it ebbs and flows. I don't know. I just think it's a lot of things. And I don't know how to be articulate about it. It's just, it wanted to be a parody off the SVU show because she just had that idea after having a fever for days. And then it just goes off the rails and does what those type of serialized dramas do. Sometimes you have little arcs. Sometimes you have one hit, like one episodes, like one shots and things like that. You have the trials of your main characters, but then you sometimes have these side characters that are around. Like, it felt like a really messed up screenplay of that type of show.
That makes sense. Yeah. I think that everybody should have you to translate this book for them.
Well, and like part of it, like I said, is when I first read Mothers, and especially Heinous, I was like, oh, that's over my head. One day when I reread this, I am more prepared. I have a framework for the nonsense that it will be, and I'll be able to like take something. But to defend your point, I think Real Women Have Bodies is one of those ones where I kept waiting for it to tell me its point. And I never, for me, felt like we got there. There were a lot of points. Like, what were with the dudes who just took pictures all the time? Why are these girls in dresses? I don't know.
Yeah. Also, I kind of feel like, what's the second to last one? The Resident. I sort of felt a similar way about that one, where I wasn't sure what the central point of that was. I just felt like it was lots of weirdness, a little bit of talking about like autonomy within your mind, and then it ended.
Yeah, and I think that one is meant to be like the Yellow Wallpaper, where it explores a woman's relationship with sanity, which I think does come up because that's the one that's more like the relationship to one's mind. But I think Difficult at Parties did it better. And even like, I didn't notice till this reread, but Difficult at Parties, that line shows up in The Resident. So it's like both these stories, I think, were created in like a similar place creatively.
Yeah.
I don't know which one was written first, but
that makes sense. Well, I guess my last question would be, what about this in particular, this entire collection will, and it could be a particular moment, but what will stick with you post reading it? Anybody can answer.
8 Bites is gonna haunt me till I die.
I was gonna say that too.
8 Bites is gonna haunt me till.
Yeah.
It's just like even when we were talking about it, I was thinking, I'm like, oh my god, no, wait, they told me that as a kid. Did did anybody else's family have you count your bites? Like count how many times you chewed before you swallowed?
Yeah.
Mine told me that I should chew
so you'll
more.
eat less. Yes, chew more. Don't scarf down your food. If you chew more, you'll get fuller faster and you won't eat as much.
Yes. Drink a glass of water before eating, so your stomach is already full.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm like, oh, so this is the book that's gonna haunt me until my dying days. I'm gonna get carried out of the house by the ghost of the person who didn't read this story. Like, just like, remember when you didn't feel called out? Yeah, see, it's a thing that they just, that book called me out. That story called me out so much. And also the idea of the husband stitch is absolutely terrifying. I knew it was a thing before I read the story. And I knew it was a thing that people did. And I'd be like, wow, those people suck. And then I read this story and I was like,
it's even worse. I learned a different thing about when women used to give birth. So the reason why they had to do the stitch is they used to on purpose tear the vagina to try and prevent tearing.
They still do that.
They most of the time they don't anymore. Well, it depends on your doctor. But they finally proved medically that it makes it worse. Like, it's like, oh my god, I hate it.
I am terrified.
When I read that story, I didn't know the ribbon story is actually an urban legend. So my one friend who was reading it with me, I didn't know that.
You didn't grow up with that story?
No, I didn't know it.
Oh, yeah, my niece has just read that story, actually, which is also part of why it's such a good story. In the actual urban legend, she tells him to take off the ribbon.
Yeah.
He's at the end of his life. She goes, it's time for you to know you have been such a good partner about this. I will lose my head. Like, it's like in the urban legend, she's the one who says, it's time, babe.
I mean, I think that's what she kind of does at the end of the story. She's like, you really want to? Fine.
Yeah, but it wasn't so much him pestering her. Like, I think in the story he would ask, and he would touch it sometimes, but never like, I'm gonna rip your, why won't you tell me? The husband in The Husband Stitch is so much more aggressive about the fact, why won't you let me know about this damn ribbon? And in the actual urban legend, which I know from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which is, like I said, my two and she's turning 6 this week, year-old nieces, they my niece, they love it. But yeah, I grew up with that story. So reading this kind of like a retelling of it, where he's so damn aggressive. And at the end, he kind of does force her hand into taking off, when in the original one, it was just like, well, I love you, so okay, go ahead, have your ribbon. And she's like, okay, babe, it's time. They're like on their deathbeds, I think. Like, they're like super old. And she's just like, take off the ribbon. And he does. And then her head falls to the floor. And that's like the last image in the book, is just a decapitated head on the floor. And my 2-year-old niece loves it.
That's interesting because of the urban legends that are woven throughout the entirety of the story. I didn't realize that it itself was also an urban legend.
Yeah, same for me. So that made those urban legends even more important. And the way that the narrative structure, the way she plays with the narrative structure, I think is fun. I like that in short stories. I read a lot of them. And like that one, how it's like, and if you're telling the story, rattle the thing and like giving you like stage cues.
I didn't know it was urban legend. I thought it was a Junji Ito reference.
No, it's been around since, God, I don't even know how old Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is, but that story's been around since I was a child. Like, I grew up on the Green River. Did nobody else grow up on that story?
I mean, they definitely existed, but I was too terrified to read them.
No, like, with that, that's a story I grew up on. Like I said, watching my nieces grow up as readers, which is great. Nora loves that story. She gets so excited. She'll like read the green one, and then she'll like be happy when the lady's head falls off. Like, it's just great. My nieces are very into death and murder right now. In vivo.
Let her watch The Addams Family.
Yes, I can't wait until I can make them watch The Addams Family.
Okay. Things that stuck with you. Who's next?
I was also going to say 8 Bites because just for context, the book I read before this was Ace by Angela Chen, which is a nonfiction book about asexuality. So really just got some whiplash from the contrast there. So I feel like 8 Bites for me was a bit more relatable.
Mhm.
And I particularly liked the family interactions in that. I feel like I don't see much of that in books.
Mhm.
Themes relating to family and like socialization within the family. So I really appreciated that. Made me very sad, but I appreciate getting sad over books.
I was also gonna say 8 Bites. I think
Say it.
Yay.
8 Bites, it's wow, such a story. It's so personal. My mom was going to have that surgery. What is the name of the
Gastric bypass.
Yeah.
that one? She was going to have it, and their relationship with her sisters is very similar to the one in this story, and it's still in my mind. I finished reading it. I got to the part, the one that's like I wrote it, do you hate my body because my body looked just like yours? I started bawling, crying a while, and yeah, I think that one kind of affected me a little bit more than the other ones, but it was really good. I took time reading the stories. Each one, like I read it in a different day, so I had like a lot of time to think about them, and think about them. I did. I enjoyed them a lot, even when I didn't understand a lot of like the point with real women have bodies. I still really like that one. But I like the whole like magical realism of it all, and how real life it's going to affect more than the magic that you may see, and how the worst parts in the horror was in the real life part, in the uh, kind of violation of boundaries by mostly men. But yeah, I don't know. I start speaking about these stories and I end up like speechless almost. It feels like something that you need to take time reading. You need to think about them a lot. Rereading it every couple of years, maybe the story could be like great. But
So
yeah,
go get a copy.
I'm gonna have to buy one. I'm gonna
This
highlight the
is
shit
definitely
out of it.
something that I would reread. Yeah. Actually, this will be my last question, I promise. I know I said that before, but if somebody enjoyed this book or a particular piece of this book, what book would you recommend outside of
Sorrowland by Rivers Solomon.
All right. Actually, that's gonna be on the list for next year if you want to come talk about it.
I love that book. That one has more themes of motherhood, but there's still a lot of, and that's one is more trans inclusive as well. But like in
Okay.
terms of like you feel uncomfy and like stuff. I don't know. That was my first thought is Rivers Solomon's writing.
That's really good to know. That's exciting.
I'm cheating
River
at looking at
Solomon.
Goodreads.
River Solomon's writing is
Especially if you want something that's like this, that is horror-ish. Like
yeah, I loved the deep. Like I truly I cried the whole way through. I took a break reading that book just so I could sit with all of the emotions that it caused because oh my goodness. It just like the idea of taking on the feelings of other people was like a lot of I don't know. I'm very empathetic, so that just really struck a chord with me. I love that book. It's so short too. So if you guys are looking for like a short read, although
awesome.
extremely impactful, that is the book.
So there's also for you guys, since you loved 8 Bites, it reminded me of a different short story that I read in New Suns. I'm trying to find the name and the author.
I have that on my Libby.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to read that.
I think it's One Easy Trick. I'm not positive, but it's in the collection New Suns, edited by Nisi Shaw. And there's one that it's another relationship of someone who accidentally displaces her fat and her relationship with how she handles that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as sad, I don't think.
Okay.
Something I did like about 8 Bites as a friend of someone who has internalized fat phobia is like a conversation I have with my friend all the time is she feels like such a monster because she can't stop eating. And I keep trying to tell her it's not your fault that you're eating. Biologically, you should eat food. Like that's just, it's your body's, not your body's, but it's biology's fault that it didn't realize one day we'd have a surplus of food and doesn't know how to healthily handle us eating a surplus. Like it's not your fault. It's not your fault you don't have quote unquote the control you want. But control was a big part of that story, because I think that is, at least listening to them, a part of it. It's like, why can't I stop after X bites? Why must I keep eating? And there's a lot of guilt I hear from that. I'm like, well, that's not your fault. Your metabolism is different. Your genetics are different. And it's...
My grandma describes it as normal people portions, which is apparently 1 cup of rice for 4 people.
No.
You divide it, because that's what normal people eat.
No. But I mean, like, I approach it a lot from a science lens, but all I can do is listen. Like, I can't relate. And I tell her, why are you talking to me about it? Like, I mean, I can listen, but I can't provide like direct empathy. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
I'm a mid-sized woman. I've always been mid-sized, and like I get annoyed when I can't buy jeans, but it's a different issue with just the jeans in general, not like having weird numbers. So, yeah.
Clothing industry. That's a whole nother live.
Yeah.
Okay. Other books we would recommend.
Yeah, I had one. Just for like overall, if you liked this book, and just the themes within there, I read The Secret Life of Church Ladies a while ago. I think that also is a short story collection that I listened to as an audiobook and didn't know it was short stories until I looked at it on Goodreads. But that one, I would argue, is a bit better with intersectionality if you're interested in race. It's about Black women, and it explores like desire and sexuality within this context of double standards within the church and that community. So that's a really interesting one if you liked the themes of sexuality in this book.
I am very interested in this.
It was really good. But again, I would definitely not listen to an audiobook. I've discovered that short stories don't really work well as audiobooks.
There's no defining stopping point. The only one I could say is that Blackout had a defining stopping point, and that was the other story that was in between each of the other stories.
Yeah, Blackout was really good on audio.
Yeah, definitely. Bodily autonomy wise, I don't think it's as... Artemis, I need you to chill for like 5 seconds. Okay. So, my cat is clawing at my door. We're not getting our security deposit back. Cállate. Okay. So, okay. So, sorry, my brain gets distracted easily. Bodily autonomy wise, the story I read was called A Shot at Normal. And it's about a young girl who grew up with parents that didn't get her vaccinated. She gets the measles, and she passes it on to somebody unknowingly, and that person dies.
Oh, Jesus.
And
wait, is that like a young adult book?
It's a young adult book.
I own that. I didn't know that's what it was about.
Yeah. So she goes
read it now.
They don't.
Goodness.
She doesn't get homeschooled. She's homeschooled. They eat like stuff they grow in their backyard, which is all good in itself. But her family is also anti-vaxxers, and so neither she or her 2 younger siblings were vaccinated. They don't tell you how she got the measles, but she got them, and she passes it on to somebody who dies, and she feels guilty about this, and her parents still refuse to get her vaccinated. They're like, well, we did the right thing, that's not your fault. And it's like the whole town's turning against them when they find out who it was. Well, but the main overarching thing is, I want bodily autonomy. I want to be able to get vaccinated. And the kind of like rift it's driving between her and her family, where she's like, I still love my family. I don't want to be emancipated. I want to be with my family because I love them. I just don't get how they don't realize why I need this. And it's like her fighting for that right to make the medical decision to get vaccinated because she feels guilty. It's not nearly the same level of writing. Not even close. And I did have some issues with it, but overall that theme of I want to be able to do this. This is my, like, I should have the right to get vaccinated. I don't get why you guys aren't doing this. It's very, the parents do at one point reveal why they did make the decision they did, but she's still like, I get that. You never told me that, but hey, but it's my choice, you know? And so I think that's a really important one for bodily autonomy. Also, just probably any book about like I have a list of books from watching Rachel's videos about reproductive rights, either in fiction or nonfiction, to read. And I feel like probably any of those books would also be a good choice for the bodily autonomy theme.
That's so interesting. I had no idea that's what it's about.
I keep thinking about the one that Handmaid's Tale was based on, or the stories about the women.
Oh, the women who was it the ones who went away or something like that?
Oh,
I have to
look,
read it.
you want to talk about
It's still
crying?
here.
Oh my
Gonna
god,
suffer.
I ugly cried reading that.
Bring back Handmaid Rachel 2021.
Yikes. Yeah, that's a good one. If you're looking for a nonfiction, yeah, absolutely. So The Girls Who Went Away by Ann Festler is about the girls in the time before Roe v. Wade, the decades before that, where they would get pregnant and their families would send them to places, sometimes homes of rich people who would have them work while they were pregnant, and sometimes places run by Catholic charities where they would be pregnant with a bunch of other girls, and sometimes they had to live under pseudonyms and had to have their babies there and then give them away, and then they could go home because their parents didn't want anyone to know that they had been pregnant. And social services would lie to them and tell them you can't keep your baby. So basically everything, every right to medical decisions, every right to bodily autonomy, every right to parenthood, everything was stripped from them. Even the right to education that would have prevented them getting pregnant in the first place. So, yes, I would say that is a good that is a good one if you're looking for nonfiction. But every trigger warning you can think of applies for that book. It's hard. It's hard to read.
A new release that's not out yet. I had an ARC. It's a novella, Flowers for the Sea. It comes out in a couple weeks.
Okay.
That's very much similar to River Solomon writing. It's about a woman who's pretty much forced to give birth because she's one of the only people who can, and her tumultuous relationship with that situation. It's also intersects with racism and stuff like that.
Oh, wow.
Well, otherness. I don't know if it's actually racism, but there's definitely a whole we are prejudiced against your kind sort of thing for arbitrary reasons and stuff.
Yeah, they still to some degree did this
Catholic
in the late
Church.
90s.
The 90s? That book's from the 90s?
No, Catholic charities to some degree still did this until the 90s. In Ireland, they absolutely did that until 1998 when the last Magdalene home was closed. Those were abusive beyond belief.
The right to education thing you mentioned really struck me. My family is a family of young mothers. I'm like the oldest to not have had a child yet, and when my grandma had my mom, apparently they sent her to a different high school while she was pregnant with my mother, so that she would. I don't know if they didn't want her like. Pregnancy is not contagious, but like they treated it like it was, and so they're like, oh, you're going to go to this other school because you know while you're pregnant, and then once you have your baby you can come back. My grandma unfortunately did not finish high school after she had my mother, but like that was a thing that people did, and it's like, so you have to go and get an entirely different school, probably in a different education because of that, just for 9 months, or depending how long into the school year you are.
Yeah,
because you got pregnant young. That's ridiculous. And so that's definitely another right that they take away, at least back then, still now probably take away.
The Magdalene homes. So if you're looking for a book on that, oh crap, what is that? What is that book called? I have it on my shelf. Shit. The main character's name is Rachel. That's all I can remember.
Everyone go to Rachel's channel, find all the videos.
Yeah, exactly. Oh no, you'll just have to stay here and watch all Rachel's videos.
Freaking frick. I can't even, if I could picture the cover. Oh, I can. All the Bad Apples by Moira Fowley Doyle. Moira.
There you go.
Doyle. There it is.
Brain
That's a very
for the win.
Irish name.
Yeah, as soon as I could picture the cover, I could think of the name. Okay. All right. I think that we have covered everything. I appreciate all of you being here so much. I think that you all made great points. And once again, because of listening to other people talk about the book, I have gotten more out of my reading experience. So thank you for that. I actually forgot to link everyone's channel down below, but I'm going to do that right after we're done here. All right.
What's your next read, Rachel?
What's
your
my next read?
What's the next read for the book club?
Oh, what's the next one? Iron Widow by Jiran J. Zhao. I'm so excited. It's fine. It's just my
Are you
favorite.
going to be able to form coherent sentences?
I was
Or are you
gonna
just gonna squeal
say.
the whole time?
No.
I was gonna say I'm reading. I reading that book like specifically sooner because of you, because I remember I was like, yeah, it's gonna be on my TBR, but I don't like sci-fi that much right now. And then I was like, Rachel keeps ranting about it. I kind of have to read it sooner.
Listen, even if you don't like sci-fi, you will like that. It's not as much sci-fi as it is everything else that's wonderful in the world. I just love it so much. I can't even like.
It sounds like the character work is worth it because you only get those responses when people love the characters and would die for them.
If anything else, the author seems absolutely amazing, and I just want them to have every opportunity in the world to continue writing. And so I will read the book solely because I think the author sounds amazing without even knowing what the story is about. I'm pretty sure it's a retelling of the last.
I'm planning to reach out to do an author interview. So
do it.
All right. Thank you all for being here. We'll see you next time for Iron Widow. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.